Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. So today's topic is nutrition, and the title is Fit the Diet to You. So I want to give an example of a diet that I wrote recently for someone and kind of discuss how the diets they had done in the past were very black and white structured. And the diet that I gave them had more gray areas and more allowance depending on their individual needs. So we were just going to discuss some of the concept behind that and how it works and how it applies. So first of all, though, I wanted to say thank you for the people who are the patrons of the podcast. So they help pay for the support for the podcast. I do sincerely appreciate it very much. Thank you. And then those who send emails, those who send suggestions, thank you for participating. It's super duper exciting fun. It is very motivating to know people are finding interest and benefit from the podcast. So thank you to those who do that. I really appreciate it. So the diet we had written for this client, they wanted to lose some water weight and kind of tighten up and do so in a little bit of a quicker fashion than what would be considered a normal lifestyle management way of doing it. And what I mean by this is they wanted to do it in a way that didn't ruin their life and they didn't have to run their life around it, but they're okay if the rules were a little stricter than what they maybe can continue in everyday living. And I wanted to kind of give an idea of that one because often people, when they do a diet, and whether this is for like weight loss, whether they're doing a diet to try to bulk up, like gain a bunch of size, like anytime somebody does a diet, they typically would like to have immediate results. However, diets that give immediate results aren't usually long-term successful. So if it was a diet was able to change your body, every 5 days, well then obviously within 10 units of 5 days, we'd have all the changes we wanted, and then we'd have to kind of back off that diet. So there would have to be a lessening of the intensity of the diet to make it more of a lifestyle of holding on to the benefits of the diet. So while we're trying to get those changes, though, sometimes we'll push hard, we'll expect things better, we'll want things faster. And that's very typical. It's not a bad thing, it's not wrong. It's just understanding that for you to get fast results, you have to do more aggressive stuff, but that aggressive stuff cannot be kept up for life. So let's run through kind of like how we structured this diet and the modifications that were made to specify for her exact individual needs. So, for example, her first meal of the day would need to be delayed due to thyroid medication. So sometimes clients will take medication in the morning, and the medication is needed to be taken without food. So they'll take their medication in the morning, and then they may have to wait, for example, an hour before they can consume food and calories. Now, often this will be conflicting with diets that say you need to eat right away, first thing in the morning. They'll say breakfast is the most important meal. It helps, get the metabolism going. And there are some truths and some positive aspects to having like your first meal of the day be right away. But sometimes that's not possible if in order for that to happen means you couldn't take the medication that was helping your health. So we have to understand that there's layers of things that are important. So what is the most important thing would be getting that medication in. So that's what we do. Is her first meal isn't scheduled till after the medication. So rather than somebody thinking their first meal has to be done immediately when they wake up, I've actually heard of clients where they would have gotten up really early, taken their medication, and trying to go back to bed, and wake up an hour and a half later, so that way they can then technically have their breakfast right after they woke up. But the downside to that is you break rhythm of sleep. So, for example, I had a client who used to do that. She would try to get up at 4, I think, or 4:30 or something. She would take medication, and she'd try to get up at like 5:30 or 6. But When she got up at 4, so did the dogs. So the dogs would get up. They thought this was the time we're getting up. So she would, have to let them outside after she took medication. She'd have to make sure they come back in. Then if it's raining, you got to wipe them down and dry them. And then when you want to lay back down, they think the thing's already started. So they're all, up and active. And often a lot of that stimulus that's created is going to prevent really the person being able to get back to sleep at all, or at least any good quality. So when I talked to that client, I said, "Why in the hell are you getting up so early to take that medicine?" And they said, "Well, I know I need to have the medicine about an hour, hour and a half before I eat, but I know that I need to eat as soon as I wake up. So I try to take the medicine and go back to bed, so that way when I wake up, I can have the food." And I told him, I said, "Well, that's not necessarily the best thing, because what we're trading off here is quality of sleep, which is extremely important for just some minor benefits to the first meal of the day being, exactly right when you wake up versus 1 hour later." So that's something we want to think of, is what is the thing that best fits our needs, given a priority understanding of our needs. So sleep is extremely important. Okay, the medication is extremely important. Those things are more important than the person eating their first meal, say within an exact 15 minutes right after they wake up. That kind of thing. So then her daily meals are actually dependent on her schedule. So we did not dictate specific times for her meals. And one of the main reasons why is her job has an unpredictable workload throughout the day. So she has to work every day. But sometimes she has meetings at 9 a.m. Sometimes she has meetings at 8 a.m. 10 a.m. Sometimes she doesn't have any meetings in the morning, but she has all of her meetings in the afternoon. So her schedule is unpredictable. Therefore, what we did was we decided on her daily meals based on digestion rates. So if after her first meal, she knows her next meal would have to be within only, say, 2 or 3 hours before a meeting. Whereas if she was going to wait till way after the meeting, it'd be way too long to eat. So let's say she had her first meal at 7, and she knows she has a meeting at 10. That meeting might not be over till 12 or even 12:30. Well, she's not going to go from 7 till 12:30 or possibly 1 without any food. So we know if that meeting's starting at 10, then we would like her to eat at 7 and then maybe eat again around 9:30. So what we wanted to do and how we set this up was, if she knows she has a short time frame between meals, then she would select foods that would digest within that short time frame. So that way at the next meal, she's not just piling on more calories when her body hasn't used the calories of the first meal. That'll create a caloric surplus, and then she may actually retain or create body fat. So by us selecting meals that digest completely pretty much by the time of her next meal, that'll ensure that she doesn't have caloric surpluses every time she eats. So she'll spend more of her day at a caloric maintenance and or deficit, allowing her to actually strip off body fat over time. So how we made this look in terms of the rules are, we know that carbohydrates in general digest faster than fats. So back in podcast 41, titled Diet Right, What Matters Most, we talk about the things that are most important in a diet. Whereas caloric control of some way of counting calories or tracking calories or maintaining appropriate calories. So you can either do it through volume control of foods. Okay, I have typically this much serving size every time I have this food. Depending on how I feel, maybe I'll increase that or decrease that. So that's one way, that's a totally fine way to control calories, because you're controlling the amount that you're taking in and you're making that consistent. So therefore you have a known quantity to then make changes for in the future. So what we did is, like I said, we set up her foods to where she has fast digesting foods, or if she has a long break between meals, so say she has her first meal at 7, she has a meeting at 9, that may not be over till 11. So she may have to go from 7 to 11 or 11:30-ish for a meal. So she would then pick foods that digested within that 4.5 hour time frame. And that's going to be mostly fats. So carbohydrates digest quicker, on average, we'll just say 2 or 3 hours. Whereas fats digest slower, and we'll just say on average 4 to 5 hours. Now there's an enormous amount of variance in what I'm saying, but the general concept is true. Carbohydrates digest faster, fats digest slower. So if she knows she has short time frames between her meals, she has a protein and carbohydrates. Okay, and again in podcast 41, we discussed the importance of protein. It's the second most important thing. So once you have calories controlled, you need to control protein. There's tons of benefits to it. So you can listen to podcast 41 to learn more about those. So that's what she has. She has a protein and carb for fast turnaround meals where there's not a lot of time in between. Then she has a protein and fat for meals that will have a longer amount of time in between. So that way, by having the fats, which digest slower, the calories she has at 7 will take kind of a slower time to break down and be used up in her blood system. So that way they might actually not be broken up and used up until that meal. Whereas if she would have eaten protein and carbs, that food might be digested by, say, within 2 hours. And then all of a sudden, if she can't eat for another 2 hours, she's going to spend 2 hours in a deficit. Her body's going to get grumpy. It's going to start sending cravings. Cortisol levels are going to go up. The body just kind of gets unhappy because it's having to run on empty, just like us trying to run a car on empty. So it's just a strain on the system. So that's what we did for her daytime meals. We allowed her to pick the meals to be protein and carb or protein and fat, depending on what her schedule was throughout the day. So since she can't change her work meetings, we had to learn how to change her foods. So that helped a lot. Then the last meal of the day, she has kind of some rules to it, but in general, she would eat at about 1 to 2 hours before bed, and she would have proteins and fats. And the reason for that is the fats, since they digest slowly, her body will have kind of more nutrients throughout the night being broken down, and then the blood system to do repairs and daily maintenance. So that's the idea of personalizing a nutrition plan. So with her schedule being inconsistent meeting times, we had to create a way of eating where she could change her eating based on the meeting times, but not lose the results of the diet. So that helped us a lot. Another thing that really helped was we selected foods based on the macronutrient type. So we wanted a protein. So therefore we kind of listed a couple good options that were quote unquote good sources of protein. So she doesn't have to have, say, cottage cheese and fruit at 10 a.m. because sometimes she doesn't have time to eat at 10 a.m. She's got a meeting, she's got other stuff going on. And then what if they don't have cottage fruit cheese, okay? What if she doesn't have a refrigerator with her at work? So there's a lot of what ifs to where if you specify exact foods, stuff can go wrong where that exact food in the exact way in which you need it can't be met. So more often people will feel like failures towards their diets when they have diets that have specific food choices. So we selected nutrients, like foods, based on their nutrient type. So we said, here's kind of a bunch of healthy proteins. Here's a bunch of healthy carbs. Here's a bunch of healthy fats. From these lists, select whatever you'd like. So that way she doesn't have to eat the exact same food every meal. She doesn't have to have only, say, I'm trying to think, like sweet potatoes on hand. Whereas if she doesn't have sweet potatoes and then all of a sudden she goes to a restaurant and they have rice, that's fine. Sweet potatoes and rice are totally fine. They're both carbohydrates. Done. You don't have to specify sometimes the exact type of food if that food and another food are still within the same kind of category. So there's a couple fats we picked, a couple proteins we picked, and a couple carbs we picked. And then we even allowed for her to select some of her own based on certain parameters. So as long as she met a certain grams of protein, she could select from a couple different sources. As long as she met a certain grams of carbs per meal, she could select from a couple different sources. So same thing with fats. So we allowed the diet to be personalized by working around her medication. We allowed the diet to be personalized by working around her meetings. And we allowed her diet to be personalized by allowing her to have specific food options. And that allowed her to have a lot more kind of individualistic type of aspects to the diet. And she's going to be better able to follow the diet. Now, one of the downsides of this is that as soon as somebody gets the kind of information, it does seem overwhelming. There's almost like so many options that they feel kind of uncertain as to what is the right ones. There are no right options as long as it's within the guidelines. So if their guidelines include 10 different foods, then any of those 10 foods is okay. Otherwise, they wouldn't be included. So that would be a way of trying to predict whether somebody has a challenge with this type of diet style or not, is if they like things to be black and white, yeah, that might look good on a piece of paper, but that doesn't work in life. So if your meal at, say, 3 p.m. is always supposed to be quinoa, okay, as your carb source, and let's just say chicken. Well, what if you don't have quinoa available? Okay, there are plenty, there are dozens of foods that will do what quinoa does for the body. You don't have to have specifically quinoa. You can select from any of those dozens of foods to have a similar response in the body. So that really allowed her a lot more variability, allowed it to personalize the diet to her flavor profiles and what she prefers. So, when you're looking at a diet for yourself, it's better for you to make that diet fit your schedule than trying to fit your schedule around the diet. So when you try to fit your life around the diet, that typically is not a successful approach. So instead, we want to fit the diet around your life schedule. That will be a much more productive approach because it'll be long-term sustainable. You won't feel like you're messing up all the time. You won't feel defeated all the time. And you're more likely to have kind of more confidence in what's going on because it won't feel like you're always failing. So, what often happens is people want to know the specifics, but they don't want to know the basic information, the basic knowledge of why that specific is a specific. So if your diet says you have to have quinoa, why? Why quinoa? So ask that question, look that up, find the answer. It's better for us to know the basics of nutrition, and then within those basics, find the specifics that apply to us, rather than only learning specifics that maybe apply to someone else, but won't apply to you. Okay? So that's what we need to do when it looks at diet. When we think of diets, is we need to fit the diet to you, not try to fit you around the diet. So there's some things to think of. If you need help trying to create a diet structure that fits your lifestyle, if you have a very tough lifestyle, email us or email us brutalironjim@gmail.com. We will help you create a diet, okay? So, but recognize that you don't have to live in misery. You don't have to constantly live in failure, feeling like you're always letting yourself down by not meeting these rules of your diet, when most of those rules actually don't even need to be there. Okay? So reach out to us if you need any help, and then hopefully this kind of gave you a little eye-opener to the fact that we need to understand why our diet is written a certain way, not just try to follow it blindly. So know the basics, then apply the specifics within those basics that best fits your needs. Okay? Cool. So if you like the podcast, please share it with family and friends. The more people we help, the happier the world will be. Also, if you like this information, you can find more from us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Brutal Iron Gym. And if you have any questions, feedback, or suggestions, we'd love to hear from you. The podcast is for you. So we want to know what you want to learn about. And you can tell us at our email at brutalironjim@gmail.com. As always, I hope this was helpful. And thank you for listening. And thank you for watching.